In this first lesson, we will trace the evolving definition of the term metropolis, from the etymological origin to recent debates on how to define the contemporary metropolis. Then, we will look into the three main underlying issues: scale, quality, and data, in understanding the complexity of contemporary metropolises. Finally, we will introduce some key concepts in framing the new discipline. Rapid urbanization has been one of the urgent issues across the globe in the past few decades. According to the Population Division of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, today 55% of the world's population lives in urban areas, a proportion that is expected to increase to 68% by 2050. As a consequence, more and more cities are now becoming part of larger metropolitan areas. But what is a metropolis, and how is it different from a traditional city? In the Cambridge Dictionary, metropolis is defined as a very large city, often the most important city in a large area or country. The term itself comes from the ancient Greek word metropolis, meaning the mother city of a network of colonies. Then, the word prominently reappeared in the Western world in early 20th century with a more modern meaning. It described the urban expansion that had been occurring at different times in different locations around the world over the past 2 centuries. In this context, the use of the term metropolis emphasized the size of the city that had changed. Otto Wagner and Ludwig Hilberseimer were amongst the first scholars who raised the issue of the Großstadt, that is, the big city, in reference to the change of measure and scale of the urban settlements in the wake of the industrialization in the Western world. The phenomenon of the contemporary metropolis is, however, quite different from the modern industrial big city. Unlike the prediction of early modern metropolis being the vertical city, driven by progress, technology, and science, what we experience now is rather a more complex horizontal metropolis. There are many underlying reasons to this phenomenon that are also complex and intertwined, but here we will focus on the 3 issues of data, scale, and quality of living. Statistics such as population, density, and economic indicators have contributed significantly in shaping the modern boundaries of urban areas and the lives within them. Data is still considered as reliable evidence in our time in making significant decisions from urban planning to regional and national governance. There is no doubt that it has improved our choices in modernizing our lives, both collectively and individually. Data helps us to evaluate current conditions, set goals, and measure the improvement. However, there also has been an increasing criticism about the use of data. According to the urban theorist Neil Brenner, the demographic data supporting the urban age hypothesis are deeply inadequate because they were derived from nationally specific census agencies that define the city and the urban scale using several inconsistent, unreliable, and incompatible indicators. These main indicators, such as fixed population size, density threshold, or administrative classification defining a city, are arbitrarily selected. However, the boundaries drawn between urban and non-urban areas by these data have significant impact on all the decisions that follow. The variety and complexity of physical transformation of the contemporary metropolis cannot be explained within the traditional urban frameworks. A new way of recognizing the metropolitan phenomena beyond duality of urban and non-urban is mandatory. In addition, the issue of the metropolis cannot be reduced to a matter of quantitative data. In other words, the bigness of the metropolis cannot only be explained with numbers. The scale shift has also introduced a qualitative shift in human interrelation with and within space, largely depending on the emergence of the out of scale in our spatial experience. The idea of measure has always been closely related to the human scale, which was compatible with the urban fabric and density parameters of the historical urban settlements. Today, however, this kind of relation, typical of the local scale or scale of proximity, is embedded in a larger context of mass mobility of people and goods. This implies a greater order of magnitude in the interactions between individuals and groups in space and time. Geographer David Harvey in 1989 described this condition as time-space compression. This condition enables new lifestyles and behaviors that are in some measure universal and homogeneous, supported by real-time virtual communications and the renewed awareness of natural environment. Yet, metropolitan types vary from one context to another, suggesting that each metropolis still is a result of its own geographical, cultural, and social context. Mexico City and Milan have apparent differences in quantitative data, scale, and ways of lives, but both, without doubt, are metropolises. In many parts of the world, metropolises are steadily being recognized as autonomous governance and administrative entities, while establishing a sense of belongingness for the inhabitants to a much larger society. However, this doesn't mean urban or city scale don't exist or are not relevant anymore. The metropolis exists in a scale continuum from neighborhood to nation. It is a specific scale enabling strong relationships amongst diverse agencies working as an entangled system in both the strategic and physical level. Hence, a metropolis has the potential of leaping the scale between the local and the global. According to urban theorist David Graham Shane, we can think of the contemporary metropolis as a net city. It is essentially a system of cities of different sizes functioning as a whole throughout a network of physical and virtual infrastructure. In this polycentric system, however, we are not only dealing with the nodes and the edges of the network. According to authors such as Terry McGee, Edward Soya, Neil Brenner, Alessandro Balducci, and many more, what is relevant is that we are facing a hybrid territory where urban and rural scales define a seamless heterogeneous landscape. For this, Shane raises the issue of the body space in the net city, that is, the spaces in between the mesh of the net. The recognition of body space allowed us to discover new patterns of settlements that are beyond the dichotomy of urban and rural patterns. It opened a whole new possibilities of shifting between different scales and time that require new spatial practices, social behaviors, and organizational structures. This change also fostered engagements of new spatial agencies such as private and public organizations, universities, families, in the interactions amongst global and local forces, challenging fixed administrative boundaries at different scales and requiring innovative forms of institutional organization and planning. The contemporary metropolis cannot be defined by statistics nor be considered as a globally homogeneous phenomenon. Instead, we need to focus on the paradigm shift from city to metropolis that brought us a new way of understanding our living context, the new measure and scale of contemporary lives. Therefore, considering this different nature of the contemporary metropolis and its inherent issues, we cannot understand it within traditional disciplinary boundary. In the next lesson, we will try to overcome this limit by framing the metropolitan complexity as the basis of the metropolitan discipline.